Hello, everybody. This is Stav Karras, and I am joined today by a very special guest, Danny Phillips, who I have the pleasure of being in a band with. Would you like to introduce yourself, Danny?
Yeah, name's Danny Phillips. So I play in a band with Steve called Crazy Nights. Singing the best of one of the greatest rock and roll bands ever, Kiss. So Steve's the lead guitarist, and I'm a rhythm guitar and vocals. And we're here to rank the Chili Pepper albums. We're both big Chili Pepper fans, and we're gonna have different polarizing opinions, and that's cool. That's why we make these videos. So I think I'm gonna cop a lot of hate in the comment section,
Yeah.
particularly in the later half of the albums, but we'll see how we go.
That is the name of the game. You have your diverse opinions, and your YouTube comments has everybody losing their shit. That is the YouTube spirit.
And looking forward to it too. So
Yes, yes. All right, Danny, shall we get into it, man?
yeah, let's go.
All right, so we kick it off 1984 with the self-titled Red Hot Chili Peppers kicking it right out of the gate with the funk. How do you personally view this one, Danny?
I think this one, the songs are excellent. The band found themselves in a bit of a predicament at the time with two key members leaving just before the recording of it. So the songs, in my opinion, are better on the original demo that they did with the original lineup. Not that the new lineup was bad or anything, it was just different, and the production didn't do the band any favors. It was really slick. It was like the production was trying way too hard to be radio friendly, and that's not what those songs called for, in my opinion. But yeah, I think given it is what it is, and I do love it personally. But I'm gonna rank these albums based on how true they are to the band and their original idea, in my opinion. So I'm gonna go with a C for this one.
All right, see, that's entirely fair. I kind of have a similar thinking pattern to you in terms of the debut album. Certainly, they were already beginning to find their sound very early on in their career. They had really only been established officially for about a year at this point. They had some really powerful songs packed into this album, such as Police Helicopter, Get Up and Jump, Green Heaven. Those are just to name a few.
Yeah.
Punchy songs, unfortunately, marred by very unpunchy production.
Yeah. 100%.
To put it bluntly, the snare sound alone just sounds like a little bit of a silent fart. Sadly, like
Yeah.
just.
There's a lot of basketball kick drum on that album.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Anthony, look, he sounds a little less confident on this album. That's understandable given it's his first album and he wasn't really naturally a rapper or a singer. So you got to kind of look at that with different contexts. That being said, the songs themselves are good, but the production, I think, in this case really lets it down because it's not just a sonic thing, it also affects how the songs are delivered. And in which case, it really takes the punch out of a lot of the songs. So for that very reason, I'm probably going to mark it at, I reckon I'm going to mark it at C for that one.
We agree for now.
Yeah, but if you ever want to have a good view of a performance, go look at any of these songs performed in a live setting, and they are brilliant, especially Green Heaven.
Yeah.
All right, so we move on to Freaky Styley. This is an interesting one. What do you think of this one, Dan?
Yeah, so this one, my favorite member and favorite guitarist of all time is Lil Slovak, and he was I think it was evident with this album that he was the missing ingredient to the band. The songwriting, you can really tell that it's a different shift, and they were firing on all cylinders. Still trying to figure out what it was that they wanted to say, in my opinion, stylistically. But this is their album that is most straight ahead funk in the traditional sense, and I love the songs like Black Eyed Blonde, Jungle Man, Yertle the Turtle, amazing songs, and the guitar playing is awesome. It's to me this is an A tier album. Production's great, and you could feel that the band's having a good time.
Yeah, entirely fair, and I think that's a really good way to put it. Really firing off on all cylinders, and you can see that in a lot of ways Hillel Slovak, especially at the time, was kind of the magic source in the band. This is a very, very interesting album because if you think about it, it's not really like any of the other albums. It's got none of the sort of bubblegum pop sound of the first album, and it doesn't have a lot of the dated sound of the albums to come afterwards. So in a way, it's actually probably one of the biggest standalone albums they have. I think the songs are really tight. I find the arrangements are very fun to listen to, especially things like Yodel the Turtle or Hollywood Africa. But I also like some other ones like Nevermind or there's so many that come to mind. It's almost too hard to put into words. It sounds like a big game of what if. Like, had the first album sound like this, it would have been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Look, it's one of those things where, like, I think the songs are great. I think it's still, obviously, and this is just where they were at the time. And based on personal preference, by the way, so this has nothing to do with, like, how well the album was done or whatnot, or the skill of the musicians. It doesn't have that emotional hit for me that some of the later albums do, and we'll talk about that later. So, for my personal taste, it doesn't rank quite as high. It definitely is a step above the debut album. I probably rank it at B. It is a good album. The playing is fantastic. I find the songs don't have that emotional touch for me that some of the later songs do, and that is mostly just a taste thing. That is not to do with how well the album was done. And
So that's a B for you, that one?
that's a B. It's a very good album, but just based on personal taste, I think probably not as high as some of the other ones. But that being said, it's pretty hard to fault the album.
Yeah. So, Uplift.
Uplift. Okay, this is where it starts to get...
one off?
Yeah, I'll kick this one off. This is where it starts to get really interesting. So I guess, and Danny, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically the lineup that was intended for the debut album.
Yeah.
Right.
Original.
This is where you really start to hear that stereotypical Chili Peppers sound, which honestly goes on to define really what the band became. Very early on, you have songs such as Organic Anti-Beatbox Band. Of course, you have the cover of Subterranean Homesick Blues, Behind the Sun, No Chomp Love Sucker. There are so many songs on this album. Me and My Friends ends up being a long-time classic. My only... Fight Like a Brave is another one. My only criticism with this album is it does sound very carbon dated. You can tell when it's from just from listening to it. And that's something that a lot of bands were guilty of at this time, especially in the 80s. But ultimately, it doesn't... It's one of those albums that it doesn't as easily stand the test of time for me. But you can really start to hear the songwriting evolve. You can start to hear Anthony getting more comfortable within himself, and you start to hear that Red Hot Chili Peppers sound evolve and develop. And for that very reason, I still put it in B, but it is a step above Freaky Styley in that respect. It definitely improved, but there are some things that personally I would leave off the table with this, but there is an evolution in their sound.
Yeah, my opinion of this one is that I actually think it's their best album, period. So I think it's having the original lineup back there. In my opinion, you could tell that they said what they wanted to say. They did what they were set out to do. So, they're just blazing on this album. So you can feel everything about it. It's more on the rock side. You can feel a lot of it like heavy, deep grooves. You can sort of feel the connection between the members at this point. I think like on a personal note as well, not that it matters with my tier rankings, but this sort of album tells me everything that I need to know about the band every time that I put it on and have a listen to it, and also on a personal level, everything I need to know about myself and my tastes and on a deeper level, if I want to think philosophically and stuff like that. It's just such a deep album to me, and Hillel's guitar work is amazing. Like nobody was doing that stuff in the 80s. The solos and everything. it makes me feel a lot of emotions, listening to this album. So, it's I think it's just great. I feel chills and sadness and joy and everything. To me, this is a S tier.
Totally.
I think this is the band's best work.
I think something I wanted to touch on with what you said, and even though you and I don't really have that close of like preferences in terms of this band, it's a testament to how powerful they actually are, and that they invoke that emotional response in so many different parts of their career. Because the way you described Uplift Mofo Party is dead on with how I would describe a lot of their other albums, and for the band to have the power to do that either way, I think is a testament to how great they actually are.
Yeah.
So that's something I thought I would just hit home when I heard you speaking about Uplift Mofo Party. So you've got this at S.
Yeah, this is S for me.
Now, through a lot of band tragedy and a lot of lineup changes, essentially the band was 50% different.
Yeah.
We come to Mother's Milk. Obviously some different lineup changes within then, but ultimately lands on John Frusciante and Chad Smith for Mother's Milk in '89.
Yeah. So this album is this is actually my favorite album of all time out of any band in any genre. But my favorite, I think my favorite Chili Pepper album is Uplift, but Mother's Milk is my favorite of all time, if that makes sense. It's a sort of a weird concept, but I think like the songs just have like a real kick-ass vibe, and the energy is, I thrive off energy. I love it. So the new lineup was great. It's obviously the longest serving lineup, so nobody's got a bad thing to say about Chad Smith and John Frusciante. They brought something to the fold that wasn't there before. I love that the album is a tribute to Halil. They added the track Fire, which the original lineup recorded as a tribute. It also was my segue into getting into other bands like Fishbone. Philip Fisher played drums on Taste the Pain. And there was a snippet of Bonin in the Boneyard on Good Time Boys. But yeah, the songs are kick-ass, Good Time Boys, Subway to Venus. I love Magic Johnson. Just any song of this album. It's amazing to me. This is a S tier album as well. I don't think it doesn't give quite the same vibes as Uplift, but still I think musically, production leaves a bit to be desired, but musically I think it's S tier.
Great. This is a very interesting album. It's one of those things where, again, like I can sort of give some sort of objective commentary on it while still having my subjective feelings about it. I definitely think it definitely doesn't rank super high in terms of my favorites, but it's undeniable how powerful this new lineup was going to be already with their first album. The Stevie Wonder cover of Higher Ground, Fire, like you mentioned, Taste the Pain, Subway to Venus, Johnny Kick a Hole in the Sky, Pretty Little Ditty. There's quite a few examples of musical virtuosity, and from such a young guitarist as well. Talking about a guitarist when, like, I have students that are as old as he was in this, and it's mind-blowing to think that. It does have that issue of sounding dated, and I don't necessarily come to this album that often. Just again, it's that issue of the emotional connection, which is so fickle and it's so subjective, and it's not necessarily a reflection of the album's quality. It is a very unique album in that it mixes with a lot of almost heavy metal concepts, which would go on to define bands like Rage Against the Machine, for example.
Yeah, true.
And I thought that makes this album really quite unique, and I absolutely love the performances from this era on the live shows. So I do think that is really strong. Yeah. I think this album is about B. It sits probably in line with, if not just below Uplift. But it is around that B tier for me. But it is undeniable that they were onto something really special here.
Yeah. And speaking of...
Yeah. The Juggernaut.
Everybody's favourite. Yeah, the Juggernaut. Blood Sugar.
Good God.
What do you
What
have
an
to say
album.
about Blood Sugar?
And crazy to think that it's even such an impactful album by the context of 1991 when everybody was putting out their juggernaut albums. Metallica,
Pearl Jam, Nirvana.
Pearl Jam, so many others, and still this album stood out. It goes on to define a lot of that stereotypical Chili sound even further than the two preceding albums. You got your obvious hits such as Give It Away, Under the Bridge, Suck My Kiss, but then you got some really cool, slightly more obscure ones such as Breaking the Girl, the Greeting Song. Power of Equality is probably my favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers song. It's just such a powerful song. If you want to listen to music mastery at its finest, go on YouTube and listen to the isolated tracks off any of these songs. Especially one of my favorites being the bass track of If You Have to Ask. One of my favorite. It is absolutely brilliant, but it's probably one of my favorite produced albums from the band.
Yeah.
It seemed like they dialed everything in just perfect. In terms of the album as an entirety, I came to it a little bit later than the other ones. And for that reason, it hasn't quite set in with me as much as some of my other favorite albums. That being said, this was an enormous step up in quality from the preceding albums. And for that very reason, I put it in A.
A? Only A?
Yeah.
Only A.
That being said, it is absolutely brilliant, and it's probably some of the best playing that they've ever done, like technical playing.
Yeah. I think, it's sort of, where do you start with this album? It's near perfect, in my opinion. It's just amazing. Amazing production. The songs speak for themselves. The playing is off the hook, and it's just a great album. So, songs like, obviously, Give It Away and If You Have to Ask, Funky Monks,
I forgot about that.
Grooves, the grooves are just so deep, on this album. It feels like everyone was connecting on a deep level for this record. But I think the only criticism I have for this album is it was the first of their albums, to be pretty lengthy. I don't remember exactly how long it turned out to be, but I think it was around 70 minutes or something like that. Maybe not that long, I don't remember. But I think they probably could have cut a couple of the weaker songs. But even so, it's S tier to me. I think it's probably, along with Californication, maybe almost every fan's, top Chili Pepper album.
Yeah, you're not going to get many people saying that they don't like Blood Sugar. It's a pretty unanimous favorite in the fan club.
Yeah.
So it's an S for you?
That's S.
Yeah, sweet. That makes sense. That makes total sense. All right, it gets interesting again.